Mikael. Bezrat Hashem, this year will we all have the merit to stand under His chuppah.
Amen.
Bezrat Hashem, to have only bracha, ve'atzlacha, and light, and Yeshua. And Bezrat Hashem, for everyone here, anyone who needs to get married, this year Bezrat Hashem will get married. Anyone who needs atzlacha will have atzlacha. Anyone who needs parnasa will have parnasa. And Bezrat Hashem, שהקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא את כל משאלות לבכם לטובה, אמן כן יהי רצון. You know, Rabotai, in the next couple of days, you have very critical days. Bezrat Hashem, this Sunday that's coming up, is Rosh Hashanah. As we know, Rabotai, in these days that are approaching Rosh Hashanah, these days are actually the days that we decide how our year will be, the year that at least is coming will be. In the sense that what we do now has direct effect on the year to come. In these days, if a person comes and he does Teshuvah, and in these days, if a person goes closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the year to come, it will be full of bracha, v'atzlacha. Whatever a person does in these days have direct effect on the year to come. So Rabotai, in these days, we all need to do our effort to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We all need to do our effort to find where we can come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to do our Teshuvah in order for the year to come to be blessed with all the blessings, Bezrat Hashem. Rabotai, when we speak about Teshuvah, it's a concept that is very interesting. Because Teshuvah, it's very clear that by doing Teshuvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a person receives blessing. Now, what really stops us from doing Teshuvah? What holds us back from doing Teshuvah? If we all agree that Teshuvah is what's going to bring us blessing, then what's holding us back? And the answer to that, Rabotai, is very simple. The answer to that is Yetzer Hara, the bad inclination. Every person, Rabotai, has a Yetzer Hara. Every person has a bad side in him. And this bad side, this Yetzer Hara, is very smart. He knows how to take every individual and he knows how to evolve himself on every single person to find that person's weaknesses and build off top of that. If one person, his weakness is Shabbat, then Yetzer Hara will know that on Shabbat he's going to attack him. If one person's Yetzer Hara is food, then he knows for a fact that when he's around non-kosher restaurants, he will attack him. Every single person has a different Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara forms himself in a different form to every single person. We know, Rabotai, the biggest war that a person has in this world is not any enemy that a person can imagine. The biggest war that a person has is the war against his Yetzer Hara. The biggest war that a person needs to deal with, and this is a war that starts from the day he's born and it continues on until the day he leaves this world, is the war of Yetzer Hara. The bad side every day of a person's life will be there guaranteed to try to convince the person to do something that's in the other way of doing something good. You know, Rabotai, we know what the Gemara says in Masechet Brachot, Daf Samech Aleph. There the Gemara says something amazing. The Gemara says that when a person is born in the world, he is not born with the good side and the bad side. When a person is born to the world, the Gemara says that he's born only with his Yetzer Hara. He's born only with his bad side. And actually, from the day the person is born until he is 13 or 12, depending if it's a bachur or a bachura, all that time the person is only with his Yetzer Hara. And that is why we say that until a kid is 13 years old, all his sins go on to who? To his parents. Why? Because he's relying on the Yetzer Hara Tov, he's relying on the good side of his parents. So actually the Yetzer Hara is with a person more than the Yetzer Hara Tov. The bad side of a person is with a person more than the good side. So Rabotai, when we hear about this Yetzer Hara, we hear about this bad side that each and every one of us have within us. Sometimes we can ask ourselves, if this Yetzer Hara, if this creature that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created is so powerful, then I can't fight it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a creature that's too big for me to fight. And that, Rabotai, is something that we should all know, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not challenge a person with a challenge that he can't handle. Every person that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts a challenge on him, it's a challenge that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that he has the power within him to fight that challenge. So Rabotai, when we, especially in these days that we surround ourselves, that we think about this concept of Teshuvah. We think about this concept of coming back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And sometimes we can think that it's too hard, too far for us. You know, 2 weeks ago in the Parashat HaShavua, in Parashat Ki Tetzeh, what does the Torah say? The first pasuk, Ki Tetzeh LaMilchama Elohecha, V'natena Hashem Elohecha Beyadecha. The Torah says that when a person goes out to war, and as we know about what the Gemara says, what is the biggest enemy of a person? Yetzer hara. The biggest enemy of a person is Yetzer hara. So when a person goes to war, when a person goes out to war against his enemy, which is the Yetzer hara, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will put the enemy in the palm of his hands. What does that mean? If a person, Rabotai, decides to fight his Yetzer hara, if a person decides to get up and to fight his bad inclination, HaKadosh Baruch Hu not only will help him, not only will give him the strength, but will also put the enemy in the palm of his hands. Rabotai, when the Yetzer hara sees something like this, when he sees a person that within him has a great koach, within that person he knows that if he gets up to fight Yetzer hara has no chance against him. What does Yetzer hara do? And especially Rabotai, in these days, I can guarantee that we all have these thoughts. The Yetzer hara comes to each and every one of us and tells every single person you know, you're thinking about doing Teshuvah in order for the year to come to have blessing. I see you thinking now, you go to Shabbat, you hear the rabbi speaking about Teshuvah, Rosh Hashanah, to have a good year coming upon us to do Teshuvah. The Yetzer hara tells every single person, how can you do Teshuvah? All your life, you did sins. All your life, you were not in the right path. What you think that now if you get up and you do Teshuvah, you think now if you start keeping Shabbat, you think now if you start looking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, suddenly HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bless you. Suddenly everything is going to change. The Yetzer hara tells a person, even if you do Teshuvah, it's too late for you. Is it possible for a person to get up now and do Teshuvah? Rabotai, Ari HaKadosh says something amazing. Ari HaKadosh says that when a person comes down to the world, as we know, every person has the tikkun that he must repair. Every person has something that he comes down to the world to fix. And we learned that for the big part of it in Parashat Mishpatim, in the Zohar Kadosh, that there it speaks about all the tikkunim and all the different, I think the best word to use it in English is the destiny that a person needs to come to fix, to repair. Now, as we know, every single person comes down to the world to repair something. Ari HaKadosh says something amazing. He says that before a person can start repairing what he came down to the world to do, he must first do the exact same sins that for those sins he was sent down to the world. Meaning that in order for a person to start his Teshuvah, he needs to first do all those sins that for those sins he was sent to the world to fix, he must repeat them. The second he repeats them, he can start his Teshuvah. Rabotai, if a person was sent down to the world in order to fix that sin that maybe he had in a past life, that he didn't keep Shabbat, in order for him to start his fixing process, fixing the tikkun, he must first do the sin of Hillulah Shabbat. So essentially, Rabotai, a person, in order to fix his tikkun, in order to repair what he came down to do, he must first go down. After a person goes down and he repeats all those sins that sent him down to the world, from that point that he completes all those sins, from that point and up, he can start his Teshuvah, and he can start repairing what he came down to the world to fix. Essentially, Rabotai, that moment that we think to ourselves, is it possible for me to do Teshuvah after all these sins? Rabotai, we don't know. Maybe that can be the moment where a person filled up what he needed to fix. He filled up all those sins that he needed to fill up in order to start his Teshuvah. And in that moment, the thought of Teshuvah came to the mind. There's a Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Zayin. There's a Gemara speaks about a person called Elazar ben Dordia. The Gemara says that Elazar ben Dordia was a big Rasha. The Gemara says that Elazar ben Dordia, any sin that was available that he could get his hands on, he would run to do. The Gemara says that there was a sin under the planet that Elazar ben Dordia didn't do. One day, Elazar ben Dordia heard that on some beach there is an opportunity for him to fulfill one of the biggest sins that he's ever done in his life. When Elazar heard this, he said, I have this opportunity to do this big sin. I'm going to run and do it. So of course, Elazar ben Dordia, he ran with all his energy, he did all his effort in order to get there as soon as possible, and he committed that sin, one of the worst sins that he did. On the way back, the Gemara says that Elazar heard a voice saying the same way that Elazar is paving his path in the wrong way, that's the same way where Elazar will never be able to do Teshuvah. The further he goes in the path that he's going, it's just making it more impossible in order for him to do Teshuvah. When Elazar heard that this voice said that Elazar will not be able to do Teshuvah, he said, I will not accept the fact that I cannot do Teshuvah. So the Gemara says that Elazar ben Dordia got up and he ran to the mountains. When he got to the mountains, as we know, Rabotai, every single big thing, every single thing in this world has an angel on top of it. So Elazar ben Dordia ran to the mountains and started to scream to the angels of the mountains. He told them, please go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive me. When those big angels of those big mountains heard him begging for mercy for them to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those angels said, how can you expect us to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to ask him to forgive you when we need to pray for ourselves? How can we pray for you when we need to pray for ourselves? When Elazar ben Dordia heard that, he decided that he's going to look for somewhere else where they will pray for him. The Gemara says that he went to the ocean. When he got to the ocean, he begged the big angel of the ocean, please go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask him to forgive me. And the angel of the ocean answered him the same way, that how can he ask for forgiveness for him when he needs to pray for himself? And like that, Elazar ben Dordia went to every single big force that existed in the universe, begging from this force to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive him. After Elazar ben Dordia, he saw that nobody are willing to help him. He said, it's in my hands to fix my situation. I am the only one that can fix it. The Gemara says that Elazar ben Dordia, he went down on the floor, he put his head between his knees, and he started to cry to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara says he cried so much that parcha nishmato. From the amount that he was crying and praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he passed away. He died. The Gemara said that the moment he died, there was a voice heard from Shamayim, heard from the sky. And what did this voice say? Rabbi Elazar ben Dordia, harei ata mukhan v'mezuman l'chayei olam haba. This voice announced, Rabbi Elazar ben Dordia, you are welcomed and ready to come to paradise in Chayei Olam Haba. Rabotai, I have a question for you. Elazar ben Dordia, all his life, he did sins. All his life, he did the worst things he could possibly do. His last moments before he was alive, he committed one of his worst sins. What? Because he prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he was invited to Chayei Olam Haba. Not only that he deserved paradise, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself invited him. Is that fair, Rabotai? A person that has no mitzvot, a person that has no good deeds in his hands, he goes and he gets invited to paradise? And the answer to that, Rabotai, is what we said. Elazar ben Dordia, his neshama, in order to start his reparation, he had to go to the bottom of the pit. And only after he committed the worst sins that a person can imagine, only there he can start his teshuvah. Only from the bottom he was able to start. So the moment that he prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the moment he cried to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive him, he was already at the lowest point. And that moment that he accepted on himself teshuvah, he was already considered to be a tzaddik gamur, a complete tzaddik. Rabotai, each and every one of us, if we think to ourselves and we say, how can I do teshuvah? I have so many sins in my hands. How can I come and change everything in one moment? Rabotai, maybe that one moment that that person realizes that he has some sins in his hands, maybe that's the moment where he got to his low point where he can start his aliyah. where he can start his Teshuvah and start repairing what he came down to the world to do. You know, Rabotai, when we hear this, we say, okay, I want to do Teshuvah. Rosh Hashanah is coming up. I want to come forward to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to accept my Teshuvah in order for the year to come that I will be eligible to receive all these blessings. What is Teshuvah, Rabotai? What does a person have to do in order to come forward and to do Teshuvah? Rabotai, the Zohar Kadosh says something amazing. The Zohar Kadosh says that the biggest part of the Teshuvah is not running around and doing mitzvot, and not running around and trying to do, to become a tzaddik and fasting from the morning to the night. The biggest part of doing Teshuvah, it's from libo shel adam. The biggest part of the Teshuvah comes from where? Comes, Rabotai, from the heart of the person. When a person takes himself and he has this thought that comes from the heart, that he wants to take Teshuvah and he wants to repair himself, and he no longer wants to do those sins that he did, in that moment, Rabotai, he already did a complete Teshuvah. Like what we learned with Rabbi Elazar ben Dordia. That the moment that he took upon himself Teshuvah and he took upon himself that he will no longer do those same sins, in that moment, he already became a tzaddik gamur. He already became a complete tzaddik. Why? Because the big part of the Teshuvah is from the heart of the person. You know, Rabotai, in Matan Torah, in Mount Sinai, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to Bnei Israel to offer them the Torah, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu offered them, what did Bnei Israel tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Naaseh v'nishma. We'll do, then we'll hear what we have to do. First we'll do the Torah, first we'll keep the Torah, then let's hear what we have to keep. Rabotai, how can you do what you don't know what you're supposed to do? How did Bnei Israel scream, Naaseh v'nishma, we'll do, then tell us what we have to do? How can you do something that you don't know what to do? And Rabotai, this goes back to our same point. Bnei Israel, at the time of the Kabbalat Torah, in their heart they accepted that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give them, they are willing to accept. In their heart they decided that they're taking the Torah upon themselves. And that moment that they took the Torah upon themselves, even knowing they didn't do anything, they didn't do any mitzvot, they didn't learn any Torah, they didn't know what the Torah was about. But that moment that they took upon themselves the Torah, that was the moment where they already considered to be tzaddikim gemurim. Rabotai, in this month, if we take ourselves, the next couple of days, it's not anymore a month, but it's a couple of days, we have a Asara Yemei Teshuvah, we have a couple of days before Rosh Hashanah, to grab ourselves and to do a Teshuvah, to grab ourselves and to try to see where we can fix and how we can come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order for the year to come to be full with blessing, in order for the year to come to be full of all the good things that a person can imagine. You know, Rabotai, last week, 2 weeks ago, I was receiving people, and a young boy came to me, a young French boy, maybe 22 years old, very young boy. This boy was not raised in a religious home. He was very far from the religion. And he came to me with a piece of paper. And he told me, you know, I decided last week that I wanted to do Teshuvah. Now, I don't know anything about what I'm supposed to do. I'm just starting my path, but I want to do Teshuvah. So what did I do? This is the boy telling me. He says, you know, I got up and I sat down and I wrote down all the sins that I did in my life. And I want to sit down with you and I want you to tell me what to do to fix every single sin. When I heard this, Rabotai, me, myself, I almost started to cry. Rabotai, you see a person that's so far, a person that knows nothing, but he comes forward and he's trying to do the effort with whatever he knows, whatever he can do, whatever he has in his hands to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He did. I told this boy, I said, I want to tell you something. First of all, I want you to keep this piece of paper. Because I want you to keep this piece of paper, first of all, I want this to remind you where you came from, and I also want this piece of paper to be a list of things that you should not repeat. But I am telling you, Tzaddik, and this is what I told, this is bemet what I truly felt. I told this boy, you are a Tzaddik. Why are you Tzaddik? Because you took upon yourself to do Teshuvah. You took upon yourself that you are no longer going to be doing these sins. Abotay, I was thinking to myself, I said, you know what? Let's sit down and let's try to do the same thing that this boy did. Abotay, if any one of you tonight will get up and take a piece of paper and try to write down all the sins that a person did throughout the year, it's something very hard, Abotay. It's something that you need a lot of koach inside to get up and to do such a thing. And when you see a young boy that did something like this, it's big inspiration. So B'ezrat Hashem Abotay, in this month, we should all do our ishtadlut, we should all do our effort to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We should all do our effort to find a way where we can come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to receive blessing, in order for this year to come to be a year full of bracha, yeshua, simcha, panasa, v'atzlacha B'ezrat Hashem. Abotay, before I finish, I want to speak a little bit about my great-grandfather, because tomorrow night it's his Hillulah. Everyone here is invited B'ezrat Hashem. It's going to be at the Pinto Shlita B'ezrat Hashem. So I want to speak a little bit about my great-grandfather, Rabbi Chaim Pinto. Rabbi Chaim Pinto was born in Morocco, and before I get into the stories of the tzaddikim, I want to just mention why it's so important, especially in a couple of days before Rosh Hashanah, to say stories generally of tzaddikim. We know Abotay Baal Shem Tov says that Kol ha'osek b'maasiyot tzaddikim ki'ilu osek b'maaseh merkava. A person that sits down and says stories of tzaddikim, it's as if he is sitting down and learning maaseh merkava. What is maaseh merkava? Maaseh merkava is the highest form of Kabbalah. It's the highest form of Kabbalah. So if a person sits down and says stories of tzaddikim, it's as if he's learning maaseh merkava. Abotay, what's the connection? How is it if I come and I say a story of a tzaddik, that it's as if then I'm learning the highest form of Kabbalah? The Gemara in Masechet Bechorot in Daf Lamed Aleph, there it says that when a person sits down and mentions a story or learns the Torah of a tzaddik, the Gemara says his lips move in the grave. When I sit down and I mention a pasuk or I mention a story of a tzaddik, that tzaddik essentially has the merit to relearn that Torah or to redo that miracle even though he's in the grave. Why is it that when a person says stories of tzaddikim, it's like you're learning maaseh merkava? Because when you say a story of the tzaddik, when you learn something that the tzaddik put together, you are essentially becoming partners with the tzaddik. Why? Because you're giving merit to the tzaddik to relearn that Torah. And that tzaddik, that now you're partners with him, learned maaseh merkava, learned the highest form of Kabbalah, then you take those merits as well. So B'ezrat Hashem, that before Rosh Hashanah, we should all grab some of the merits of these big tzaddikim in order to stand strong B'ezrat Hashem on the day of Rosh Hashanah. So Rabbi Chaim Pinto was born in the city of Agadir. Agadir is a city in Morocco. He was born to Rabbi Shlomo Pinto. Now, Rabotay, the Mishpachat Pinto, the Pinto family, it goes as far as the Geonim. Now, it was told that one day, when Rabbi Chaim Pinto was only 11 years old, his father, Rabbi Shlomo Pinto, that was a tzaddik, it was a Kodesh Kodashim, it was the stories that exist of Rabbi Shlomo Pinto are not human-like. Rabbi Shlomo Pinto came to Rabbi Chaim Pinto and he told his son that tonight, when I go to my room to learn, I don't want you to follow me, and I want you to stay far away from my room. That night, when Rabbi Shlomo Pinto went into his room and he locked his door, Rabbi Chaim Pinto, as an 11-year-old kid, decided that he wanted to go and to hear what his father was learning. When he put his ear on the window, on the door, he heard his father learning with who? With Eliyahu Hanavi. When he heard him learning with Eliyahu Hanavi, Rabbi Shlomo Pinto was actually learning with Eliyahu Hanavi something that's called Aliyat Neshama. What is Aliyat Neshama? Aliyat Neshama, Rabotay, is something that only the big tzaddikim like a Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar, Rabbi Chaim Vital, Ari HaKadosh were able to do, which was at the time of Keter, at the time of Musaf of Shabbat, they're able, with psukim that they say and with a specific thought that they have, they're able to lift their neshama and to go to the next world. That essentially their body is alive in this world, but their neshama, their soul, is already in the world to come. And there they are able to learn in the Metifta Derakia, in the Bet Midrash of the next world. Now, when Rabbi Chaim Pinto, as an 11-year-old kid, heard his father learning with Eliyahu Navi how to do this, Rabbi Chaim Pinto decided that maybe this Shabbat he's going to try this thing that he learned by listening to his father. When the Shabbat came, and at the time of Keter, Rabbi Shlomo was famous for doing Aliyat Shamayim. He was famous at the time of Keter, doing this Aliyah and going up to Shamayim. When they finished Keter, and Rabbi Shlomo Pinto already came down and already finished his journey, they finished the Tefillah, and each one started to prepare themselves to go home for the Seudah. They realized that Rabbi Chaim Pinto, the 11-year-old child, is still in the same position of Shmona Esrei. They realized that Rabbi Chaim Pinto is like a brick, like a statue, lavdil, from the same position that they went in at the time of Keter. When they tried to awake him, they saw that he's standing, but he's not moving. Right away, Rabbi Shlomo understood that Rabbi Chaim Pinto actually did Aliyat Neshama. When Rabbi Shlomo Pinto saw that he did Aliyat Neshama, there was a big problem. As we know, what the Kabbalah says, that a person could only do Aliyat Neshama at the time of Keter. Only one time in a week, which is the time of Musaf of Shabbat. So Rabbi Shlomo said, if I wait until next Shabbat, he's no longer going to be alive. But I have to go up to bring him back down. So Rabbi Shlomo took a minyan, and he told them to start praying Tefillat Mincha. He told all his Hasidim, all the people that were around him, he told them, after Mincha, when we do Nakdishah, there's a big possibility that I will no longer be here. So take care of my Chaim Pinto. They did Mincha, and at the time of Nakdishah, Rabbi Shlomo Pinto did what he did, and he did Aliyat Neshama. In the book that one of the Hasidim of Rabbi Chaim Pinto wrote, that actually says this story, says that when Rabbi Shlomo Pinto got up to Shamayim, he found Rabbi Chaim Pinto lost. And he didn't know what to do. When he approached his son, he told his son, what are you doing? So his son said, Rabbi Chaim Pinto said, I learned to go up, but I didn't stay long enough to learn to come down. So what happened was that Rabbi Shlomo Pinto actually taught him how to come back down, how to do the Yerida. And actually, Rabotai, that is where they part in ways. And when Rabbi Chaim Pinto came down, on that time of Mincha, Rabbi Shlomo Pinto passed away already. At age 11, Rabbi Chaim Pinto was already an orphan from his father. 1 year later, there was a famous earthquake in Agadir. Not the one that was 40 years ago. There was one before that, 200 years ago. Which that earthquake destroyed the entire Agadir. Destroyed the ports, destroyed everything. After the entire city was destroyed, unfortunately, Rabbi Chaim Pinto lost who? Lost his mother. And Rabbi Chaim Pinto was, as an 11-year-old, he was all alone in the city of Agadir, where all the Jews were already moving to Mogador because there was nothing to do in Agadir anymore. Everything was destroyed. When Rabbi Chaim Pinto, as an orphan, homeless, he went on Agala, went on a chariot of horses, and started to make his way towards Mogador. When he arrived at Mogador, he had nowhere to stay. He searched for the nearest shul he can find, and there he found the shul of Rabbi Meir ben Attar. There he went into the shul and he found a corner and he went to sleep for the night. He was mamash, a 12-year-old orphan. That night, there was one of the close relatives of Rabbi Chaim Pinto. His name was Rabbi Meir Pinto, where he was actually a banker that was in Morocco but would work for the French government. That night, when he was sleeping in his palace, because he was a very wealthy man, Rabbi Shlomo Pinto, Rabbi Chaim's father, came to Rabbi Meir Pinto in a dream. And he told him, how are you sleeping in this big palace when my son Chaim Pinto is sleeping on the floor in a shul? Rabbi Shlomo Pinto ordered Rabbi Meir Pinto to go and to bring Rabbi Chaim Pinto into his home. Rabbi Shlomo Pinto said, you know, Rabbi Chaim Pinto now is a child. But his neshama has the power and will do great things in the future. So raise him as one of your own. Right away, Rabbi Meir Pinto went to the shul of Rabbi Meir ben Atta. When he got to the shul, he started knocking on the door in order for Rabbi Chaim Pinto to open the door. When Rabbi Chaim Pinto as a child heard knocking, he ran to the door and he asked Rabbi Meir Pinto to repeat a specific pasuk, a pasuk that's in the Torah that apparently that the Kabbalah actually says about it, that it's a pasuk that mazikim are very scared of. At the time in Morocco, there was a lot of I don't know how the right way to call it. In Hebrew, it's shedim, mazikim. The best way to call chas v'shalom is a demon, chas v'shalom. So Rabbi Chaim Pinto told Rabbi Meir, repeat this pasuk, because those mazikim, those demons are scared of this pasuk. So they are not able to repeat it. Right away, Rabbi Meir Pinto repeated this pasuk, and they opened the door. When he opened the door, Rabbi Chaim Pinto already told Rabbi Meir what Rabbi Shlomo told him. When Rabbi Meir Pinto saw this, he understood that Rabbi Chaim Pinto is something big, still a child, but he has something big to become something big. Rabbi Meir Pinto took Rabbi Chaim Pinto into his home, and he took him to the Av Bedim. He took him to the main chief Dayan, the chief judge that existed in Morocco. Now that chief judge was Rabbi Yaakov Bibes. Rabbi Yaakov Bibes was the biggest Dayan. He was the Av Bedim of Morocco. And there Rabbi Chaim Pinto learned all his Torah from Rabbi Yaakov Bibes. When Rabbi Chaim Pinto was only 18 years old, it was told that Rabbi Yaakov Bibes passed away. After he passed away, they were searching to find who can replace this big tzaddik, who can replace Rabbi Yaakov on the position of the head of all of the judges. And they didn't look any other place but Rabbi Chaim Pinto. And actually, Rabbi Chaim Pinto, and this is mentioned in many books, became the head judge, the head of Bet Din of all Morocco at what age?
18.
At age 18. There, you can find Rabbi Chaim Pinto throughout the many books of Halakha that are written, and he's nicknamed as Saba de Mishpatim, the grandfather of law, the grandfather of Halakha. Rabbi Chaim Pinto served in a Bet Din that they called them Echad. It was 3 Dayanim. It was him and Rabbi David Chazan. Rabbi David Chazan was a big tzaddik also, and also a big family of tzaddikim that existed in Morocco, like Mishpachat Pinto, like the same thing. And they served together hand in hand, Belimut Torah. They served together hand in hand in the court. They served together hand in hand as chavutot and everything. It was told that every single Friday night, Rabbi David Chazan had a tradition that he would come to the house of Rabbi Chaim Pinto, and they would sit down and they would learn about the parasha. And they made a promise between each other. They made a promise that the day that each one of them, no matter what, if Rabbi Chaim Pinto passed away before Rabbi David Chazan, or if Rabbi David Chazan passed away before Rabbi Chaim Pinto, in any situation, under no circumstance will he stop coming on Friday night to learn their Friday night limud. It was told, there's a big famous story, I'm not going to mention it this time, but the passing away of Rabbi David Chazan. A week after he passed away, on Friday night, Rabbi Chaim Pinto sat in his home and he called one of his helpers, called one of his gabayim. And he told one of his gabayim, I want you to go to the house of the wife of Rabbi David, and I want you to tell her and ask her, why isn't her husband at my house? Now, this helper, this gabay, when he heard this, he said, is it possible that the rabbi doesn't know that Rabbi David Chazan passed away? Is it possible that Rabbi Chaim Pinto forgot that Rabbi David hasn't passed away? But Rabbi Chaim Pinto insisted that he will go and he would tell the wife of Rabbi David, why is he? Where is he? When he approached the house of Rabbi David and he knocked on the door, and the widow opened up the door, he looked at her and he said, Rabbi Chaim Pinto has a very strange request. But he wants to know, why isn't your husband at his house on Friday night? When she heard this, she became white. She looked at the helper and she says, how does Rabbi Chaim Pinto know that Rabbi David promised me that even after he will pass away, he will come do me kiddush? And he can't be in the two places at the same time. How does Rabbi Chaim know that? When the Gabbai heard that, when the helper heard that, he understood that Rabbi Chaim Pinto was up to something bigger. So right away, Rabbi David Chazan told his wife to tell the helper that he should go tell Rabbi Chaim Pinto that from now on he will be coming every Friday night to learn Torah with him, but unfortunately he will not be coming to the house of his wife because she told the secret. And the only way he would come to her would be in the dream. So Rabotai, that was the power of the tzaddikim at that time. The tzaddikim at that time, they were more than tzaddikim. They were anshe nisim. They were people of miracle. They were mamash tzaddikim that we should all, Bezat Hashem, find this opportunity. As we know, the 3 days before the Hillulah and the 3 days after the Hillulah, there are days that have a lot of power, that the tzaddik is able to grant any tefillah that the person has with his merits. So Bezat Hashem, that we're in these 3 days and we have another 3 days coming upon us, we should all pray with the merit of Rabbi Chaim Pinto and with the merit of all the tzaddikim HaKadoshim and all Rabbi Chaim Pinto and Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzia. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give everyone here bracha v'atzlacha b'kol ma'aseh yadayim. And Bezat Hashem to have a year that's going to come upon us of bracha and atzlacha, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimaleh